Hello friends of WildRift and welcome back to another RiftGuides WildRift video. For today we are going to take a look at the 4.1c patch notes and we will talk about those changes and what they're doing to the meta and the game in general. But before we do this, let's talk about a question of the day. How familiar are you with WildRift esports? Let me know in the comments below. The first change comes to Gwen. Here we have 1000 cuts being lowered in its AP ratio from 0.006 to 0.005%. Another adjustment to compensate for this nerf, her third ability Skip and Slash is getting a cooldown reduction on the earlier levels, but later on it comes down to the same cooldown again. This change will help Gwen in the early stages of the game with the reduce on her third ability, but later on she'll deal a tiny bit less damage. Is this going to change anything about Gwen and her viability? No, not at all. For our next champion we have Cannon, and he is a buff to his second ability, Electrical Surge. The passive damage is getting increased by 10 flat and gets a better scaling on its ability power ratio. This will help Cannon be more oppressive during the laning phase, to manifest stronger leads in the laning phase to then snowball towards teamfights and other points in the game. This will however not make Cannon meta, it will only make him a tiny bit better when he's already good in certain matchups. The next change we need to talk about comes to Lux, and this one is actually game changing. It's about Lux's Prismatic Barrier. The cooldown goes down by 2 seconds on all ranks, and this is quite a big change. If you think of Lux's identity next to her catchy nature of throwing out her light bindings to get someone caught and then kill them instantaneously after, Lux's other identity is all about shielding. So she's an offensive utility mage that offers everything you want, similar to a Seraphine. While you look at this, you might think that it's not even that much, but let me tell you this. Lux is buying a lot of cooldown reduction with, for example, the Lucidity Boots and the Luden's Echo, and not even including other items. If you think about this from this perspective, then this ability is going to have a very low cooldown and your allies will be constantly shielded. This automatically forces the enemy to buy a certain item called Serpent's Fang, and if they don't do so, they will never be able to kill Lux and her teammates unless the Lux dies beforehand. This is a very powerful change and puts Lux very high up on the ladder in terms of champion strength. The next change comes to Orianna, but this change is not going to do too much. First, she's losing base stats. She's losing 5 base armor on level 1. As a compensation, or rather as a buff or a trade-off, her first ability Command Attack gains 10 base damage and 5% scaling. Here in the notes there's a slight typo because the base scaling of Command Dissonance, her second ability, is 60%, but in these notes is 45%. In-game now it's 70%, so it's a 10% increase from before. The flat damage is also going up by 10. You might think that those changes matter a lot for Orianna, but that sadly isn't the truth. Orianna just takes way too long to come online in terms of damage and mana to be influential in any way compared to her other mage peers. Therefore, she'll just not be able to compete with them on any meaningful level. Don't forget though, if you're already playing Orianna and just enjoy playing her, then this is going to be good news for you. The next change comes to Seraphine, and here we have 2 changes. First, the surround sound. The second ability's healing per ally is getting increased by 1.5% flat. If you think about this, that it has a multiplicator, then this ability goes for crazy healing as this game goes on. In a controlled environment, you'll also be maxing this ability second after your first ability, and therefore have access to it all the time, especially if you're using the right build, which is centered around cooldown reduction and mana. Your third ability is also getting a buff, but this will not be as significant since you're maxing this ability last if you're going for a supportive build. The damage is increased on the later levels, therefore this will not have too much of an impact on her viability, but the healing buff on an ability that was already broken beforehand is something that is very much to be considered. Another champ who's already been kind of fine in the meta, not too strong but not too weak, was Sion. His second ability Soul Furnace is getting a slight adjustment. It loses 1 second of its cooldown, but also 1 second of the recast time window. If you think about this slightly changes how Sion can be played, but if you have your shield more often, it makes laning substantially more easier. Needless to say, this isn't really anything game-changing for Sion. The next thing, however, is kind of painful for this lovely champion. We have a nerf coming to Thresh, and this time it's a valid nerf. It comes to his third ability Flay. Its passive damage is getting a damage reduction by 20 flat and a little bit of scaling as the game goes on. well, quote-unquote a little. It's 35% on the highest rank, but don't forget usually Thresh will not buy AD, and therefore it's not too much, yet still quite a decent amount considering his base AD. The goal of this nerf is to remove a little bit of power of Thresh laning phase, because it's quite domineering in the sense that he can just walk up into you, cast his flay and auto-attack you to death. And Thresh is one of those supports that can literally kill the AD carry starting level 1 without any problem, simply for the fact that he has a lot of damage. The next change comes to a champion that has kinda trouble finding its space in the meta, Veigar. In this case, we have a buff to the ultimate ability Primordial Burst. The minimum damage goes up by 15 and later on by 5, the cooldown goes down and the ability size now scales with ability power. So why is this champion having trouble finding space in the meta? Veigar as a champion requires coordination. He wants to control the space with his third ability. One of the most glaring error many people commit to is not maxing this ability second. Not having access to this ability as many times as possible will usually remove all the ability you have from playing the game, since it's pretty much impossible to the enemy champions with your second ability unless they're zoned. Another thing to mention about Veigar is the fact that Veigar is a counter pick into a melee-centric combination of enemy champions. If you think about an Orianna game, Veigar usually will be just better. If you control the zone with Veigar, the enemy literally can't do anything, and if you space it correctly or place the cage correctly, the enemy can't play, and if they ever get close to you, you literally one-tap them. If you go for Luden's Echo into a Void Staff, which many people don't want to because they want Rabbit on second, you will kill people even if they're tanky with Aftershock without any problem. Your damage is beyond crazy on this champion if you know what to do. But if there was any major advice I would have to give you about Veigar, don't blind pick him and really focus on picking him into melee-centric compositions that don't have much in terms of teleports, in the sense of Zed where you can just use his shadow to blink around, or Katarina that can jump around. Look for champions that have very clear things they can do, like dashing, for example a Renekton, a Camille or anything along those lines, and make their life living hell. Another champion similar to Veigar makes life living hell to basically everyone in WildRift esports and any meaningful competition, and this is Ziggs. Here we have a buff to his first ability, Bouncing Bomb. First, the magic damage goes up by 10 across all ranks. The second change is a nerf to his Satchel Charge, the second ability. The demolition threshold is going down by 5%. What does this mean for you? In solo queue, this probably won't do too much if you think about Ziggs as a champion not being utilized properly. Properly utilizing Ziggs means that he wants to go mid lane and takes down towers, especially with a Herald Charge beforehand. All the Ziggs has to do is hit the enemy tower once, then pop his second ability, take care of the tower and then leave. This will give him a lot of gold, and especially on Ziggs you want as much gold as possible, because your champion is a hyper-scaling, super stalling champion that makes the game literally unplayable for the most enemy champions. What they're doing here is giving him more damage in trade for utility. In my opinion, it wasn't really needed to give him more damage in trade for changing a Satchel Charge. They could have just done so without any buff and it would still be fine. Ziggs as a champion is absolutely demonic in this game and has a zero risk but super high payout in the way he's allowed to be played, and makes it so unbelievably hard to finish games, contest objectives or find any kind of space towards any objective in the game. The last thing for this patch is a change to Searing Crown, and here we have a nerf. The magic damage ratio is going down from 1.6% to 1.4%. I'm very curious and I really want to understand how this nerf is even making it live, because I personally don't see any problem with the item. And obviously it wouldn't be a new patch if there wasn't new skins, some gacha system I will not even talk about because I hate gacha. But that's it for this video. Thank you all for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel and come back for more RiftGuides content. See you soon.